Hello, this is Piyush Chaudhary, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Hansraj College, welcoming you all to Hansraj e-Samvaad Center, established under the aegis of Mahatma Hansraj Faculty Development Center under Ministry of Education, Government of India. We are in the midst of the ongoing lecture series on readings on Indian diversity and literary movements, and today our discussion will focus on the lyric poem Kafi 7 by the famous 18th century Punjabi Sufi poet Bulle Shah. First, I'll be just giving you a brief intro about who Bulle Shah is. He was a Punjabi Sufi poet of the early 18th century. He was more or less a contemplative poet, as he contemplates the position and the philosophy of the soul, the body, and the divinity in this Kafi. This is Kafi number 7. We will notice that Bulle Shah becomes kind of a humanist who upholds humanism, and he shows society as society actually is. There are also elements of non-conformism in Bulle Shah's poetry. We will see how he does not conform to the fixed pattern, to the societal rules, to the societal codes of conduct. And we will see these ideas in the poetry, which we will read shortly. But let's talk about firstly some of the main themes of Sufi and Bhakti poetry, and particularly the poetry of Bulle Shah. Basically, what Bulle Shah does is he merges the self with the God in this poem, in this short lyric poetry. We will also see how the poet merges his own self with the God. So in Kafi 7, we see these ideas very clearly getting enunciated again and again, how the poet merges his own self with the God, how he forgets his own identity, how he completely merges his own self with the God. But the single most dominant theme, I would say, in Kafi 7 is identity. So my entire lecture today will focus on how Bulle Shah talks about his identity in this poem. And as I said, identity is the most important theme, right? He loses his identity. How? We'll come to see that. Let us first look at the very first stanza, and we'll try to see how Bulle Shah writes, and we'll look at the story, we'll look at the poem line by line. Let's look at the very first line. Bulle Shah says Bulla, I know not who I am. I am neither a believer going to a mosque, nor am I given to non-believers' ways. I am neither clean nor unclean, neither a Moses nor a Pharaoh. I know not who I am. So in these lines, the predominant theme is clearly identity, because the poet Bulle Shah says that he does not know who he is. Therefore, this is a clear indication of his identity. He's being shorn off. He's stripping off his identity. It is as if the poet is deliberately renouncing any sort of identity which is being given to him. And why is he doing so? He's doing so that he can obtain the higher identity, and that is of the God. So therefore, he is merging himself with the God. And this is indeed the dominant theme in this entire poem, the merging of the self with the God. And throughout the poem, this poet, he keeps on repeating that he wants to merge his own self with the God. And therefore, this is a clear example of his own identity and how he is dissociating himself with his own identity. But at the same time, he is also disassociating himself from any living, mortal, socio-cultural identity or any markers of identity. He says that I neither go to the mosque nor do I go to the temples. I am not Moses nor a Pharaoh. I am neither a believer who goes to a mosque. That means he is neither a Hindu nor a Muslim. He says he is not a believer in any religion, right? He is therefore not a Muslim. Then he also says that he is a non-believer. He is not a Hindu or a Christian or a Sikh or a Jain, or he doesn't belong to any other religion, right? Then he also goes on to say that he is neither clean nor he is unclean. Perhaps here he is referring to the caste system. He is saying that he does not belong either to the upper caste nor to the lower caste. And neither is he a Christian or someone from the Greek pantheon or someone from the Roman or any pantheon or any particular culture. Then he also talks about the most emphatic lines is how this line he writes in the very first stanza, I know not who I am. So these lines mention, and it clearly states that Bulle Shah is trying to forget himself and he doesn't know himself. So basically, what the poet is doing in these lines is he's disassociating himself with any markers of social, cultural, political identity. So in a way, he forgets himself and he's removing all markers of identity to attain a sort of what you can say an amalgamation with the god. Right? So he's removing all his markers of identity so that he can be associated with the god only and only with the god. Right? So he lets go of all social and all cultural markers of identity. Right? Now look at the next lines. Again, these are very beautifully and beautifully constructed lines, which where in fact he is further showing how he is disassociating himself with all markers of worldly identities. Look at this. He says, and I am quoting once again from the book, neither among the sinners nor the saints I am neither happy nor unhappy. I belong neither to water nor to earth. I am neither fire nor air. I know not who I am. Right? So what do we notice again? We once again notice that there is a streak of renunciation in this poem. It appears as if the poet is in a state of enlightenment here, and almost like a stoic, like any stoic, he's in a calm state of mind and he's not affected by happiness or sadness. Right? He says, I am neither happy nor unhappy. I belong neither to the water nor to the earth. He says that he's not a sinner and he does not belong to the sinners, and he's neither a saint and he does not belong to the saints. Right? So this is, he keeps on repeating, I know not who I am, because he has forgotten his identity. Why? Because he's pursuing the God, because he's pursuing his own God. Right? So once again, he repeats the same lines, I know not who I am. It's recurring. These lines are coming again and again. It means that he's disassociating himself with all markers of social, cultural, and political identity. So in a way, he forgets himself, and he's removing the markers of identity to attain what you can say sort of an amalgamation, as I mentioned. Right? Now let us read forward again. He says that he is neither a Christian and nor does he belong to any of the religions of the world. He says, and I'm once again quoting him, neither I know the secret of religion, nor am I born of Adam and Eve. I have given myself no name. I know not who I am. So once again he says that he has no name, and therefore the refusal to name himself means that he has surrendered to a nameless, religionless, formless God. And what is this God? This is Tawheed. Right? This word basically means belief in one God. If you remember my previous lecture, I discussed at length about the fact that both Sufism and Bhaktism, Bhakti movement and Sufi poetry, Sufi literature and Bhakti literature, they were all a revolt against the dominant ideologies of the time. So therefore, we see that there is a reluctance in him to give himself a name, because names carry identities. Names carry references to a person's religious identity. And here, Bulle Shah is completely renouncing all forms and all references to his identity. So therefore, one can say that this particular poem, this Kafi 7 by Bulle Shah, Kafi number 7 by Bulle Shah, he is basically, it's written in the Sufi tradition, where the poem shows how identity is merged. He doesn't merge his identity with any religion or caste system or any cultural or social political thought. And therefore, he comes across as a rebel, as someone who is rebellious against the norms of society, as someone who goes against the normative order of things, as someone who goes against orthodoxy. So when he refuses to give himself a name, he is basically surrendering to a nameless God. Okay, so let's go forward now. And he then says, look at these next lines. I was in the beginning. I would be there in the end. Who could be wiser than me? None else is primed of this secret, though I know not who I am. So here he is talking about the omnipresence of his self. And in the last line, there is clearly a paradox, as he has been repeatedly saying that he does not know who he is. So, in these lines, if you remember the name of the essay by Shishir Kumar Das, and that was the idea of a mad lover. So, there is some sense of madness and disassociation with all rules of society. In the highly stratified society of the 17th century, when religious fanaticism was rising every day, the ideas that Bulle Shah was putting forward was nothing short of madness. And here the madness is, as we have already discussed in the previous essay, the madness is not a negative term. Madness, rather, in the Hindu Sanatani tradition, madness is best if it is directed towards God. Madness is not a negative term here. Madness is not a reductive term, but here madness is directed towards the God. So this madness is going on to such an extent that the poet clearly dissociates himself and renounces all forms of worldly markers and worldly markers of identity, and he renounces, he completely disassociates himself with religion, with caste system, with names, or any forms of identity. Right? That is why I mentioned in the very beginning that identity is one of the major themes of this particular poem. Now look at the last lines. The last lines are not mentioned in your syllabus. They are not a part of your syllabus technically, but it is found in several other versions as well. He says, "I am not from Arabia or Lahore, neither from India or Nagaur, neither a Hindu or a Muslim from Peshawar, nor do I live in Nadon," says Bulla, who I am. So basically, once again, I'm sure that even if the readers and the students who are watching this lecture might not have read this poem earlier on, but they will still be able to associate these lines which I just now read with a very popular song in pop culture by the famous musician Rabi Shergill and his song Bulla Ki Jana Main Kaun. It is easily available on YouTube, and that song by Rabi Shergill was originally taken from this Kafi only. I'm sure the readers can listen to that song, and that particular song, which was released almost more than 2 decades ago, and it was also written and sung in a very similar way. The video, if you watch that video, you'll get ideas about Sufism, about renunciation, about worldly pleasures, about no amount of greed towards worldly pleasures. Perhaps I would suggest the viewers to take some time out after this lecture and go on and revisit Kafi number 7 in the song Bulla Ki Jana Main Kaun by Rabi Shergill, and you'll be able to appreciate this particular poetry in a much more better way. Also, Kafi basically means a lyrical poetry which is meant to be sung. The readers might be wondering what is a Kafi. So it is basically a lyric poetry which is meant to be sung. It is musical in its quality, and several Sindhi and Punjabi Sufi poets used to write this kind of poetry which can also be sung in gatherings, and this is one of the major reasons why there is a song also in this exact same title which I just now mentioned by Rabi Shergill. And these lines which we just now read were omitted, and which were rather found in several other versions. The last stanza which I just now read, are the characteristic manner in which the song begins, and these lines clearly dissociate another marker of identity, and that's why he says, "I am neither an Indian nor an Arabian nor from Lahore or Nagaur or Peshawar. I am neither a Hindu nor a Muslim." So listen to that song and you'll be hearing these lines clearly. So the poet Bulle Shah says that he is not from the Arabs or the India. He is neither a Muslim nor a Hindu, and he does not know who he is. So basically, the poem shows his revolt against the social institution of his age. And how does he do that? He does that by using repeatedly the word neither. He says he is neither this nor that, right? So the repeated mention of the word neither proves he is a rebellion. He is a rebel, and he doesn't show any kind of extremist tendencies. So the two types of extremists in the society, right? And therefore the poet Bulle Shah does not associate himself with any religion. So therefore this particular poem defies what you can say nomenclatures of identity. It defies nomenclature of space. It defies nomenclature of religion, nationality, region, caste, religion, or any other form of extremism. And this is one of the most typical features of Sufi and Bhakti poetry. Sufi poetry, particularly, Kafi number 7, which we just now read, it strips itself of all association and remains one and united with the ultimate God. So here, this highly self-interrogatory and highly philosophical and metaphysical poem, here on these lines, they come to an end. So as we know, the poet is basically interrogating himself. He's trying to know himself, and then he says that he's neither this nor that, and the poet is nothing, but he's just in communion with the god. He only associates himself with the god. So his only identity therefore becomes his god and nothing else. No markers of worldly desires, no markers of worldly identity. There are no markers of religion, nationality, region, caste, creed, sex, or color. So this is the high watermark, I would say, of Sufi poetry at its best, and that is why it has been prescribed in your syllabus, because right now in this unit we are reading the Sufi and Bhakti traditions. So Kafi number 7 by Bulle Shah. Do watch the song and do listen to the song that I have recommended, which is directly taken from these lines by Bulle Shah, and it will add to your experience of reading this beautiful poetry in the Sufi tradition. So on this note, I will end this lecture. Thank you so much for your attention in this lecture, and I hope the poem was easy for you to understand. I hope the explanations that I gave, it made the poem comprehensible and easy to tackle from the examination point of view. So thank you so much for joining in at Hansraj e-Samvaad. I will see you very soon shortly in some other lecture. Till then, keep reading and keep studying and keep preparing well for your exams, and please share this video with others. Thank you so much. Goodbye and Jai Hind.